And yet the shadow of Mandos lies on you also, said Melian. But Thingol was long silent ere he spoke. Go now, he said, for my heart is hot within me. Later you may return if you will, for I will not shut the doors forever against you, my kindred, that were ensnared in an evil that you did not aid. With Fingolfin and his people also I will keep friendship, for they have bitterly atoned for such ill as they did. And in our hatred of the power that wrought all this woe, our griefs shall be lost. But hear my words. Never again in my ears shall be heard the tongue of those who slew my kin in Alqualande, nor in all my realm shall it be openly spoken, while my power endures. All the Sindar shall hear my command, and they shall neither speak with the tongue of the Noldor, nor answer to it. And all such as use it shall be held slayers of kin, and betrayers of kin unpenitent.
Hey guys, it's Keep on Tolkien with Joel and
Danny J.
Thanks for tuning in. So today on Keep on Tolkien, this is going to be our part 2, not only our second episode, but part 2 of us bitching about the Hobbit trilogy for you.
The Hobbit trilogy sucks.
And it does suck. And if you listened to the last episode, you heard 3 big gripes that we had, and now you're going to get to listen to a lot more. Get ready for this.
Yeah, and hopefully, if you don't think the movies suck after listening to us, maybe you will. We're just trying to ruin it for everybody. That's what
we're just trying to ruin it for everybody. Peter Jackson ruined our childhood, and now we're just trying to ruin
it for everyone. All right, let's get right into it, guys. Here we go.
All right, so quick recap from last week's episode. It was our part 1 of why the Hobbit trilogies suck. Yeah, because they do. They just suck really bad.
They suck hard, and there's nothing you can do about it.
So the 3 main points that we had last week, which I think were our biggest gripes, were the Morgul technology.
Morgul tech, yeah, we talked about.
And how blatantly this just came about when Morgul tech is supposed to be something super specific to a specific person, to a specific character. And then the other issue that we had was
Nandor magic. That
took place with the healing scene with Keely and what's the elf's name? Toriel, who is a Sindar, which is
no, she's not Sindar. She's Sylvan. She's Nandor. She's not even the Sindar.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
A lesser form of elf, and we mean that in the best possible way.
Right. We're not racist, by the way. Here's the thing about Tolkien is it was written by a very old white dude, so
these are his categories.
Yeah, and it's gonna sound kind of racist. We're gonna sound a little bit racist, but it's kind of how it works. I mean, it's just Tolkien. I'm sorry, it's not coming from us.
Disclaimer for the episode.
Disclaimer. So they're lesser elves. Yeah, they don't know that kind of magic. We talked about that.
And then we compared it to what happened in the original trilogy, where that whole concept of being healed from Morgul wound even came from, and it was a super, super specific moment, and there was a lot of special stuff going on there, and it barely got done. He almost died. He never healed.
Right. That was the third thing we talked about. We talked about
it was
dwarves and
the
elves.
Whole relationship between Keely and Tauriel.
Yeah,
I got her name that time.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have happened for multiple reasons. We don't think they could biologically reproduce because they were made by 2 different gods, essentially.
At 2 separate times.
At 2 separate times, yeah.
So, in conclusion,
yep.
They were mostly canonical things that we had issues with the canon. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense according to the lore. And so today we're gonna get into a few more things that we don't like about the Hobbit movies. So basically, what we decided we're gonna do is just like the Hobbit trilogy, we're going to make it this topic unnecessarily 3 episodes long.
We could have done this in 1 episode.
Oh, sure.
And they could have done this in 1 movie, but they decided not to, so we're going to decide not to.
3.
Yeah.
We're going to, first 2 episodes are going to be why we hate the Hobbit. And then the third one, we're going to get a little nice and talk about the things that we liked about the Hobbit.
To be honest, there may end up being a few stragglers of the what we hate about the Hobbit falling into the 3rd episode, but we'll cross that bridge.
Generally speaking,
we're going to try to make the 3rd one mostly positive,
a little bit more positive.
But so today, moving forward,
let's get right into it.
First category that we have for you, I believe this was Danny's category.
Dragon sickness. This is something that's introduced in the Hobbit trilogy. That is what pisses me off about it. Is it's basically they're recycling the lust for the ring from the original trilogy. They're just kind of recycling that whole motif into this like lusting over gold and and all this. And it just, I don't know. It really, I think it's cheap. It's a cheap harkening back to something we're familiar with, which is a lot of the gripes I had with The Hobbit is it wasn't trying to be its own thing. It was trying to like...
There's a lot of odes to the original, and that was...
Right. A lot of member berries, right?
A lot of member berries.
A lot of member berries.
Thank you, Trey Parker, Matt Stone.
Thank you. Dragon Sickness, it has no real basis in Tolkien canon. It does kind of play along with the motif of like... corruption and like the nature of evil kind of like corrupting good at all points and greed. There's a lot of greed in the Lord of the Rings too. It's also, or in Tolkien in general, there's a lot of greed going on.
Yeah. Tolkien loves to bring out a lot of the negative aspects of humanity.
Right.
That's a big part of a lot of his other stuff. It's actually quite dark, but it's beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. People don't give Tolkien enough credit for how dark.
But I mean, that's part of what's so beautiful about it. How can you have such beautiful things if there isn't a contradictory darkness? And he even comes up with his own evil shit to throw at you, and it's pretty crazy. Anyway, moving on to category 2. While we're on the subject of the dragon,
oh man,
the one of the biggest gripes I had after watching, even during watching the movie for the very first time, was the second Hobbit movie. I think it was The Desolation of Smaug. They finally get to the one part that I thought they couldn't fuck up, if anything, was the dragon. Because I saw, they showed you some models for what they had for the dragon ahead of time, and it was pretty cool. They did a good job. And
yeah, no, it looked cool.
And I'm a big fan of Cumberbatch. I thought he did a great. He even did the animatronics for the dragon movements and everything. Anyway, props to him. But the whole dragon chase scene that ensued for just way longer than it ever needed to go.
It was totally like, I'm pretty sure that is when they fucking filmed that, is when they decided that it was going to be 3 movies.
I'm right there with you. I think that's exactly when they decided, we're going to just we should make this just action-packed and turn it into a full-on trilogy.
Yeah. And it was like...
Let's just throw in this shitty fight scene here that's going to take took up like a half hour, didn't it?
Yeah,
it felt like
at least
it was
25
forever.
minutes. I don't know. Okay, here's a story. Can I tell you a funny story about this? It's going to get a little illegal, but it's a fun story. So here's the thing. I was very excited for these movies, right? So a friend of mine was up away at school. He was like 4 hours away. So I would drive up there to see these movies with him every year. So we decided when we were going to see the second one that I was going to eat a bunch of this stuff called Duff, which I don't know if you know what Duff is. It is marijuana that has been vaped already. So
it's taken for granted, though.
Yeah, no, it's a fun, like, people throw that shit out.
Yeah,
and like
it's like, it's just a bunch of burnt shit.
Yeah, no, don't throw it away. Put it in pill capsules and eat it.
It's amazing. You get all the bodily positives without getting. Well, it can still fuck up your head a little bit.
Oh yeah, no, it's a fun ride. It's different.
Yeah,
it's different. So I decided to eat like 5 or 6 of these Duff capsules, like these pills that are filled with Duff, and I basically made a rookie mistake and I timed it wrong, and so like I got almost all the way through the movie with nothing, and it started to kick in right after the dragon scene, and the dragon chase scene had started, and I'm getting hit with this Duff like crazy. And this fucking dragon scene's going on, and I was like, I remember closing my eyes, and I was like, is this really happening? Like, what the fuck is going on here? And I was like, I just immediately started hating the movie too. I was just like, this is like, what the fuck? When he was like, relight the forges.
What the fuck?
I was like, what the fuck? What are we doing here?
Aren't there like 12 of you?
So yeah, the dragon chase, terrible, just a shitty action sequence, and
extremely unnecessary, far too long. Just the fact that they would even try to run from a dragon in the first place. I mean, the dragon would have killed them in so many instances before that. And
right.
They make that clearly evident in the way that Smaug does other things, like he destroys the mountainside that they were on, and he destroys Lake Town with just no problem. Anyway, that was a real big nail in the coffin for me. That's when I knew there was no coming back from this.
I want to know how long it actually takes to melt gold. Because I'm pretty sure it's not 2 seconds.
And to re-solidify again?
Yeah, and then for it to fucking re-solidify.
Well, I guess sort of solidify it, like, fell apart and it, like, drowned the dragon or something.
Yeah, and
What
then it,
the
like,
fuck
turned
was
into,
that
like a chocolate-dipped
sorry.
dragon that, like, with gold leaf, and it, like, just broke out of it, and it was like, and, like, all this gold fell down.
The only thing that I did appreciate about that was that's how they kind of got away with their explanation for the description of how Smaug leaves the cave, because he's supposed to leave Erebor in like a burst of flame, like up into the air, just like silver and gold flame, just and then fly towards Lake Town. And they kind of explain that away as he was covered in gold and he burst out and just gold. And anyway,
it was a crappy explanation.
I mean, it was a real shitty way to get to that point, and that everything up to that was just really shitty. But that shot of him just jumping up and gold falling off was pretty cool.
I mean, it looked cool, but I was like, that was the thing, because I was getting hit by the duff, like I said, and I was like, is this really part of this movie? Like,
and then they left it on that crazy cliffhanger too, and that was just
like,
that was I mean, don't get me wrong, cliffhangers can be good, but
sure,
that was a rough place to just leave you hanging.
Yeah. Which I'm totally sure we'll talk about this in a later episode, though. But Peter Jackson does fuck up a lot of the cliffhangers from the original trilogy by changing the timeline.
So while we're talking about the dragon chasing around the dwarves, I'm going to bridge that into my next gripe. This is going to be a third category here tonight, and that is the dwarves themselves. I was really excited to see a lot more dwarf action when they announced they were going to do The Hobbit, obviously, because most of the company, Thorne and Company, is all dwarves except for Gandalf and Bilbo.
Yeah, it's a dwarf-heavy story.
Yeah, and the dwarves were fucking cool. You always wanted to see more of them after, you grew up watching Gimli being all badass as hell.
Right.
Not the beard, man.
Not the beard. Nobody tosses a dwarf.
The dwarves in the trilogy, they just made them all super goofy. I think they were really too worried that fans wouldn't be able to distinguish between that many separate characters. So they overcompensated for making each character unique. They made each of them overly unique. They had crazy facial hair that went pointing out in crazy ways. Their hats were silly and stupid. They looked like a bunch of fucking clowns dancing around. There were a few that I liked the general makeup of. That was like Balin
and Dwalin were dope.
Balin and Dwalin were really good, and Feely and Keely's costumes were pretty good.
They were fine.
Yeah.
I didn't like how they picked like the sexy young actors to play.
I guess I'm more looking at the costumes right now.
Yeah, but the costumes were fine. I'm just like...
Costumes are fine.
It's yeah.
But, I don't know, the rest of them just looked real clownish, and it was just really unnecessary.
Yeah,
I know it was supposed to be a kid's movie, but that was, I don't know.
It's generally offensive. Because if you look at who these dwarves...
Generally offensive.
It's generally offensive. Yeah, because if you look at who these dwarves are, like, who are these guys? They're noblemen of the line of Durin.
They are.
Like, you know what I mean? These aren't just any fucking dwarves. Like, these are nobility in the line of Durin, which is by far the dopest and most prominent line.
It's the one that's the main one that we hear about throughout all Tolkien. Tolkien doesn't really cover much of the other lines. I mean, there's some about them a little bit in the First Age with Belagost and
well, we learned of
Narg.
Mim, too. Don't forget about Mim.
Oh, that's right, the petty dwarf. That's the only time that they talk about petty dwarves. There are something other than dwarves that are petty dwarves. They're not as big and hardy, and they don't do as much mining and things. They're just they're more like gnomes.
Yeah, they're savages.
They're what I'd imagine a gnome would be like. But anyway, that's a little bit off topic. But the dwarves, they just overcompensated to try to make one too unique because I think they were worried that the audience wasn't going to be able to tell them apart. And I think they just did too much, and it was just too silly.
Well, I think there was a lot of spoon feeding in this movie, don't you?
There was, yeah.
Like, that was the thing, like, one of the biggest gripes, I'm just going to mention it real quickly, we didn't talk about this, but when Sauron is revealed as the necromancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, me, because I'm a super nerd, like, I wanted him to look different. You know, I wanted him to not look the same. And I felt that was kind of spoon-feeding, like, oh, we have to have him look exactly the same as we did last time we showed him.
I can understand something like that because they're basing it off people who have seen the trilogy, and the only way that they've seen Sauron in the trilogy is in his, Dark Lord form. That's the only way they're going to recognize him.
Sauron has many forms.
There was a lot of potential there, but they had to...
Yeah, see, They
had to keep it consistent so people could carry over.
I wish Gandalf would have called him Myron.
That would have been cool.
Yeah. And then he was like, Olorin. Yeah. That'd be awesome, but it didn't happen.
But this level of just making everything way too unique, that was unnecessary.
And for spoon feeding. Like, it was like, it was for spoon feeding.
Which can bring us into the next category of unnecessary things.
Indeed. One of the weirdest things I found about the movie was just the strange fucking creatures that were in the movie that you don't like. Well, one strange creature. Okay, so the main thing I'm talking about is the fucking riding of weird animals.
Yeah, talking about creatures that we're talking about the mounts.
Yeah.
Creatures they used for mounts were really strange.
Yeah, the caribou or whatever the fuck.
Yeah,
Thranduil rides.
Thranduil was riding some caribou moose thing. I don't remember.
Yeah. So and then later on, some dwarves are riding pigs.
Yeah,
which is fucking weird.
Dane of all people.
Yeah,
come riding in on a fucking pig.
Dane of the
that guy. We're gonna get into him a little bit later. Actually, he's done some badass shit, and I think that was a little demeaning. I don't think he came off like a silly fucking Scotsman riding a pig down a hill. Like, what?
I mean, I feel that all of the Peter Jackson movies kind of do a disservice to the dwarves. Like, they make them kind of clownish.
But, I mean, even Gimli was better than that. Balin was better than that. I mean, it was just unnecessary. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, one more thing about the beasts, right? What were the Great Earth Eaters? You remember that shit?
That was super unnecessary. I think they explained that as something from the appendices. I didn't actually go and look that up because it was just... I didn't
look that up either. That's fucking weird. I
didn't care whether or not they actually existed in the Tolkien universe. All I know is that they were not at the Battle of Five Armies.
All right. So...
Speaking of Thranduil's mount...
There's a really weird part that I was very put off by. When he's talking... I don't know, who the fuck is he talking to?
He's talking to Thorin.
He's talking to Thorin.
Yeah, this is right after all the dwarves were captured in, I think it was the second movie, in the Elven Stronghold in Mirkwood, and he brings, when I say he, Thranduil, the head of the King of the Elves there, brings Thorin up to his throne room to question him and whatnot, and they get into a little bit of argument because, like we explained in the last episode, elves and dwarves,
they don't like each other so much.
They hate each other.
So yeah, so during the scene, Thranduil like leans in to Thorin and he's like, "Do not speak to me of dragon's fire." And then you see like his face is like revealed for a second that it's like fucked up and like burned and shit. Like, I don't know what that kind of like. So what bothers me is like that kind of face changing magic does happen in Tolkien. We know Finrod does it in the Silmarillion. He changes.
Mm-hmm. He's another elven king character from the first age who was particularly magical. Yeah, he was known to be able to change appearances of people, of himself and people around him and stuff like that.
Right, learned lore master, who is a Noldor, a high elf, and he's Thranduil is a Sindar,
which is again the lower form.
The lower form. Yeah. They never quite made it to the Undying Lands,
and it's just nowhere ever mentioned that Thranduil has any kind of a scar on his face or anything like that, and they just pull this hat out of their ass like, "Oh, don't tell me of dragon fire."
Is he trying to say that he fought in the War of Wrath? Is that what he's trying to say? Like, was that what they were like?
I mean, he's alluding to dragon-related shit that happened in the first age,
right?
Because I'm sure he's been around that long, but there has never been any explicit reference of Thranduil dealing with those kinds of things or it affecting him in any way, and they just... if they were trying to reference some first age shit, they did a really poor job doing it because it just came off out of place.
Yeah, it was real weird. And, yeah, he doesn't have the kind of lore, the kind of know-how to even do that if he wanted to. And it was just weird that they were like, we're going to place him in the first stage, and his face got all fucked up by a dragon.
Also, I didn't like the way that he just leaned forward with his arms behind his back, and it was just like, up in his face. It was just an annoying scene for me in general. I didn't like the shot. I didn't like that the character was doing what he was doing.
I hate both of the characters, both of the actors too.
Yeah, I think that was one of my least favorite scenes of the whole movie because I really hate the person that they. Well, I shouldn't say the person. I just didn't like the way that they did Thorin. The character was not good.
It was lame.
I don't know if that was the actor's decision or the director's, but either way, Thorin was not a good character, and Thranduil was shitty.
Even worse.
On that note, I think we're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We've got a couple more things we want to gripe about. A couple more gripes to bitch about. And
yeah, we'll be back.
We'll be back.
Here, this is Keep on Tolkien. I'm Danny J.
And this is Joel N.
And we're here talking about why we hate the Hobbit movies.
Part 2. Because we needed more time.
More time to talk about why they suck. So we're going to get right back into it.
We're going to start off with Bard.
Bard. I hated this character, too.
The reason I hated Bard in this one was... they just made him a super generic character, I feel like. I mean, the dude that they got looked just like...
Orlando Bloom?
Looked just like Orlando Bloom.
I was like, what the fuck? I think Peter Jackson's, has the same type. Whoever's casting has the same kind of baby-faced dude type.
But they played... I mean, I was looking forward to Bard as a character because he's probably one of the most noble characters in the whole story, aside from being a complete hard-ass. But they turned him into some super... suave, I don't know, slick family guy type.
He's got his family.
He's got a family.
Smuggler?
Yeah, he's got
Isn't he smuggling?
He's got 2 or 3 kids. I mean, he is a smuggler. I think he does do some smuggling.
Smuggling on the side.
I'm almost positive they don't mention anything about him having 3 kids and a wife, or a dwarf getting healed on their kitchen table.
I forgot it's in Bart's house, isn't it?
It's in his house.
Yeah, that totally goes down right in Bard's kitchen.
Oh my God, that was we don't even need to get to that because
not even we're not going to talk about that anymore. So yeah, Bard, and then it also I found it very fucking weird, the Black Arrow.
Yeah, that was
the Black Arrow. They made it well. First of all, they did it as a dwarven ballista. Windlance thing?
Yeah, they took the arrow, which was originally just literally
a fucking arrow,
a black arrow that a guy shoots with a longbow.
And he says it's his lucky arrow. He's like, yeah, I've always recovered you, arrow.
It was the arrow that his dad used, right? Because
it's
from his family line. He got it passed down from his family line. Goes back to the city of Dale.
The Men of Dale.
Men of Dale, which this Dale they explained in The Hobbit and the films and the books.
Yeah.
It's just the super prosperous city of men that was right outside Erebor, the dwarven kingdom under the mountain over there.
Yeah, did a lot of trading with the dwarves.
This whole story
they were good friends.
Revolves around.
Yeah.
But back when Smaug attacked Dale and destroyed everything originally, there were longbowmen there that were defending the city and whatnot, and Bard's family, it was either his dad or his granddad, his family line was there, and people apparently blame him for not being able to stop a dragon. They say that it's his fault that they didn't stop the dragon in the first place, or at least I think that's what the town master...
Yeah,
trying to the Lake Town Master, that's at least what he tries to convince people. Pretty flimsy, But the whole turning from an arrow to a windlance, that was really unnecessary.
It was dumb because like the whole thing was like a well-placed arrow will bring this fucker down. Like
Right.
that's the whole thing. It doesn't have to be a 4-foot long iron
Right.
shaft.
It was all about exposing Smaug's weakness
Yeah,
to
'cause the
even an
weakness.
arrow. All
Yeah.
it takes.
It's the Achilles tail over and over. Like, it's a retelling of the great warrior that has the weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't have to be a fucking
And
ballista.
they took it and they turned it into this giant wind lance that shoots this giant spear. I mean, I guess that would be more common for taking down dragons, but that's not what was in the story, and I think it just sends the wrong message in general.
All right, moving right along here.
Moving right along, this next one is pretty.
This is grievous. This is very fucked. And this is something that goes back to the original trilogy too. They are not blameless in this.
I think this is a genuine fault of the team that made the movies here. Like
Either they didn't do their research or they didn't fucking care. Like either
Right.
one of them. So we're talking here about the Gondolin blades, right? The 3 blades in that are found in the Hobbit.
Mm-hmm. They're found in the first movie.
Yeah, and so one of them is taken by Gandalf, one is taken by Bilbo, one is taken by Thorin.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And after the troll horde.
Yeah, in the Troll Horde. So there's a couple actually different problems I have with them. Is that and I didn't even talk about this earlier, Joel. I just thought of it. They don't fucking glow, do they?
Well, Bilbo's does.
Well, Bilbo's does,
But they're all supposed to do that.
they're all supposed to glow.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, when you read the Silmarillion, when the fucking Gondolindrum show up at is the Nirnaeth, isn't it? It's the last battle. And anyway, it's a huge battle. The Gondolindrum show up, and it says that their swords shine like with fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
these are the people that made these swords. This is what they do.
This is what they do.
This is the type of smithing that they.
Right. And the Gondolin is a hidden city of the Noldor. Like it's almost as cool as the Noldor shit back in Valinor. It's like the coolest place to be if you're Noldor. Turgon is its king. He's the son of Fingolfin, so we'll get to him later.
But these people made the swords, and
they glow.
Not only would the swords have glown, which they didn't.
They didn't.
Gandalf's sword is supposed to glow in the whole instance with the goblins in Goblin Town when they get into that scuffle. And it doesn't. But aside from that,
the real fucked up thing is when you look at these swords, is that they have inscriptions on them, which are in Sindarin Elvish, which is fine. It's fine. But here's the thing, it's not fine.
it's not fine.
It's not fine at all. because Gondolin was a city of the Noldor it was the city of the Noldor in exile. And this goes back to the excerpt that we read at the beginning of the episode.
They were the longest standing kingdom of Noldor in Middle-earth. And they were probably, I don't want to say the most advanced, but you could put it that they were like the most prosperous. I mean,
right.
their entire kingdom was hidden from the rest of the country at that time. Nobody knew where they were. It was a secret. One day they marched off and they found a place ahead of time, and they literally went into the secret place in the mountains and set up camp and built a kingdom there, and no one ever found them.
And nobody ever found them. And they were like, anybody
Super
who's
prosperous.
born here, you stay here for the rest of your life.
Anybody
if you
that
come here by accident,
yep,
you stay here for the rest of your life, except for a couple people. Maybe we'll talk about them later. Maybe.
2 men.
2 men. 2
dudes.
dudes.
We're not talking about elves here. Up until this
them.
point, we have not been talking about men. We've been talking about elves.
Right.
But here, we're talking about 2 men.
Yeah. It's a cool story. We'll get to it later. So the point is that the Sindarin on the blades is dumb because Sindarin wasn't the spoken language in Gondolin. And we learn that because in the excerpt that we read from the beginning, Thingol, who's the High King of the Sindar, he basically, he owns the land that the Noldor moved back into. He finds out about some fucked up stuff that they did to his relatives, and he's like, all right, you can still live here. You guys are cool. I'm going to forgive you as much as I can for what you did to my family, but you're not allowed to speak your language anymore, which was Quenya, the High Elven tongue. And anybody who does speak it or answer to it will be seen as a traitor and a kinslayer, unrepentant, meaning they're not sorry for what they did.
The Gondolinians are Noldor, and the Noldor do not speak Sindarin.
Well, everywhere but Gondolin they don't, because Thingol made it illegal, which was the excerpt that we read. And so, and when Gondolin was founded as like the hidden Noldor city, they're like, hey, fuck that. There's no Sindar here. We're going to speak our own language again.
Yeah, so the only place that specifically is stated did not speak Sindarin is Gondolin.
Mm-hmm.
They specifically spoke Quenya, which is the language of the Noldor, the High Elves.
Because even if you
it would have been written in their script on the plates,
right,
and it wasn't.
Why wouldn't it be?
It was written in the Sindarin script. So we're getting to the difference here between the alphabet. Basically, the writing was not in the proper language.
Yeah, it's not in the proper language. And also, if it were just in Sindarin, Gandalf can read Sindarin. He doesn't need Elrond to be like,
they wouldn't have
this is what that sword says.
Yeah, they wouldn't have needed
Sindarin.
Elrond to translate that shit. They would have just been like, oh, I'm pretty sure even Bilbo could read some Sindarin.
Yeah, I'm sure, because like if you were learned at all, you spoke a little Sindarin, because that was like the language of any elves. Because like we were talking about it, like in the first age, like you could go to a different Noldor city, like Nargothrond, and they're speaking Sindarin there because they're still following Thingol's rules.
Yeah, they're kind of out in the open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the whole time Gondolin was hidden away in the mountains.
Yeah, so they went back to their original language, which is what would have been on the swords, if it was on the swords. Which that goes back to the original trilogy too. They did that.
Unfortunately, they made the same mistake in the original trilogy. And I don't know if they just tried to keep it consistent, but either way, it was blatantly incorrect.
So yeah. So the gripe we have with that is the swords don't glow like they're supposed to, and they have the wrong language on them.
The last point that we want to cover this episode is basically involved around, half of the storyline that was in the fucking trilogy that never happened. And we're talking about everything that had anything to do with the Pale Orc, otherwise known as Azog, the Defiler. Within this time span that the movies took place, he was dead. He had been dead. They did reference some truth to the past and where he came from and who his character is, and that he does have a pretty specific gripe with the line of Durin. That's Thorin Oakenshield's family line, and where all the dwarves that we see in this story come from. But he's not part of the Hobbit at all in any way, and that was blatant fiction of fiction. Like, they just pulled it out of their ass. It is explicitly stated that he is dead and he was killed in the battle that they actually referenced him getting.
And they show that battle.
Yeah, they showed that battle, and they just
that's
say
where he gets his arm cut off.
Yeah, he got maimed or something.
Maimed
Nobody knew.
Oh no,
he died of his wounds long ago.
Yeah, and if you want to read about the real Azog, look no further, my friends, than Appendix A of The Return of the King. It tells all about the Durin's folk.
Because they do actually reference Azog. I think they reference his name in both The Hobbit and the trilogy.
They do. At one point he said, Azog like beheaded your grandfather, and then Thorin says, curse be his name, or something.
Yeah, because they do discuss the family line of Durin in The Hobbit, so that does come up.
Right, because that's the whole thing. They're trying to just restore the line of Durin. Like, that's
the whole all that spiel. It was awful. It was very unnecessary. I feel like that's when things got a little too packed, because they had a beautiful story to go off of. It was simple. You could have dressed it up a little bit if you wanted to, just that your wonderful fantasy adventure tale of Thorin and company going across Middle-earth to go fight a dragon and get some gold and stuff, but then they just had to throw in this extra storyline that didn't happen with the Pale Orc, and then they butchered the Pale Orc's role in Middle-earth. He's been dead for a long time. He did some badass stuff, but...
Right. He chopped Thorin's grandfather's head off.
Yeah, so where the Pale Orc actually came from, we should probably touch on that a little bit. So the Pale Orc came from... He goes back... He's within the Third Age. It goes all the way back to when Moria was officially abandoned for the first time. So toward the beginning of the Third Age, Durin's folk, who were the ones that made Moria and the kingdom of Khazad-dûm, and they were very prosperous at the time. They had been for quite some time. It was basically the dwarven stronghold within Middle-earth, and they kept delving very deep for the mithril that the Misty Mountains were rich with, and they delved so greedily and so deep that they released the Bane, what is it?
Durin's Bane.
Durin's Bane.
Which is a fucking Balrog.
It's a fucking Balrog from the first age.
From the first age, just hiding out down there.
It's a demon. It is quite literally a demon. It's like a fallen Maiar, fallen demigod.
Yeah, they're fallen Maiar. So it's the same kind of creature as Gandalf and Saruman.
Yeah,
but just corrupted.
On the same level,
yeah. Which is why Gandalf is able to kill that shit.
But it kills him too.
But it kills him as well, yeah. Because they're evenly matched.
Yeah, it was.
They both know magic and shit.
And the Balrog comes forth, it just slaughters anyone that's not already killed, just runs, and the whole place is abandoned. He killed Durin in that big battle, which is why they called it Durin's Bane. And after that, Moria was mainly abandoned until Azog came along and decided he wanted to take claim over Moria and all the stuff that was in there. Apparently, the Balrog went back into hibernation at some point or something, but apparently it wasn't a big...
They're just able to like deal with it better.
Maybe they're able to just avoid him, but either way, they decided to go in and claim Moria for themselves. And while they were living there, Thror, who is Thorn Oakenshield's grandfather, comes along. He's in the line of Durin, and he says, "Hey, I want to go check out Moria again. We dipped out on that place a long time ago. Let's go see what's left and see if we can claim our leftover treasures." And so Thorn's grandfather, goes to Moria, and there he encounters the Pale Orc, who kills him and cuts his head off, carves his name into Thror's head, and throws it out the door toward the only other dwarf that was there. It was Thor's companion that he came with. I think it was his brother, but his name is...
Oh, yeah, Nain. Yeah, Nain Ironfoot, right?
Yep, he throws the head down out the door at the foot of Nain, who is Thor's brother, and gives a message, go back, take this sack of gold for your troubles, and go back and tell your people not to come here again. The sack of gold was supposed to be an added insult because it was just like a few coins. But, so that's what really started the bad blood between the dwarves and the orcs to begin with, because that's a very big theme, is how the dwarves and orcs hate each other. That's something that's a theme that goes through a lot of Tolkien, and that's actually a pretty general theme throughout a lot of fantasy.
Yeah.
And here, this is how they explain it. So Nain goes back, and he gets the rest of the dwarves, and they come, and there's a huge battle that ensues, and they slaughter. And in that battle, which they show in The Hobbit, in The Hobbit, they show that the Pale Orc was just maimed, and then he just got dragged back.
Because, he really kills Nain, right, in single combat.
Yeah, in reality, he kills Nain in single combat and cuts his head off, too.
Yep, and then Dane, son of Nain, who's riding the fucking pig, right?
Yeah, Dane is in the Hobbit movies. He's the one that comes riding in on the fucking pig.
Riding on the fucking pig.
Dane here, he comes storming into this battle.
He's just a kid, as in the Reckoning of the Dwarves, so he's probably like 50 years old, but he's like a kid, and he jumps up and just assails this dude, cuts his fucking head off, and that's the end of Azog the Defiler.
Yeah, he actually carves, it's either Durin's name or Thror's name, I think it's Thor's name, into Azog's head, and then puts his head on a spike.
And then they stuff the coins that were given.
The little sack of coins, they shove it in his mouth.
Yeah, and all this is in the appendix of The Lord of the Rings, by the way. If you want to read more about this.
That's how the Pale Orc actually died, and why he's not part of the Hobbit trilogy.
He's long dead. And the reason they did it, man, is because they had to have, again, spoon feeding. They had to have super tangible villains, and then they ended up having way too many fucking villains. You had the Ringwraiths, you had the Necromancer, you had fucking Smog.
Spiders.
Yeah, spiders.
The elves were working against them.
The elves are kind of, working against them at points. There's just, we're not sure who the fucking villain is, And
I think that whole issue carried on into the Battle of Five Armies in general. The whole Battle of Five Armies was an absolute mess. It was supposed to be quite clean cut Originally, it starts off as a disagreement between the elves, the men, and the dwarves.
Fighting over all that money.
Yeah, fighting over all that money. It's just kind of a three-way disagreement.
The dragon's dead now.
Or the elves and the men, I think, team up at one point, so it's them versus the dwarves.
Yeah, they all, like, come down and they're all like, we want some of that money, too.
Yeah, at that point, Dane was there to back up the dwarves.
Yeah,
so it's more or less Dane
up.
and dwarves versus elves and men, and they just have a gripe going on. And then out of nowhere, the goblins and the wargs come riding down from the mountains to just come slaughter everyone, because there had been a lot of bad blood brewing between the dwarves and the goblins for a long time. And as it turns out,
they're super pissed off that Gandalf killed the great goblin.
Yeah, and the things that happened along their adventure to get there did have an effect on that. Like that's what sparked them coming down to battle, but it did not happen nearly like it did in that. They just made that so hard to follow.
It was
there were giant earthworm monsters.
Yeah, the great earth eaters.
The great earth eaters, and then just all this crazy shit that just was not there.
Mm-hmm. And like the Battle of the Five Armies is one of the bigger battles of the Third Age. It's not like it's not like it's a pussy battle.
But it's like they were trying to one up the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
Right, and it's like you're not, that's like the biggest,
That's one of the biggest battles in Middle Earth.
In Middle Earth history, really. I mean, like the only battles that are bigger than that were the Second Age, First Age. Right. So yeah, in conclusion, that's bringing us to the end of episode 2 of Why the Hobbit Trilogy Sucks. And yeah, some of the points we touched on today, Joel.
Today we touched on dragon sickness and why that's not much of a thing and more of a ploy from the original movie trilogy that they're just trying to cash in on.
Cash in.
Mm-hmm. Then there is the whole fucking dragon chase.
The time filler.
The time filler at the end of the second movie, Desolation of Smaug, that was just not only unnecessary but extremely just implausible.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, just to fill time.
Mm-hmm. To fill time.
It was just ridiculous.
There was also another category, was the overcharacterization of the dwarves. They were all way too overdone just to make
offensive.
them. It was offensive. It was offensive. They overdid it just to make it too clear who's who. And then we also touched on the extremely crazy animals that they rode on in this movie. They decided to ride pigs and caribou.
Or deer, whatever the fuck that thing was. I'm not a zoologist. I don't know.
I'm not a zoologist. It's something.
I'm not a Middle-earth zoologist.
They figured they could get away with some crazy form of deer. Then there's Thranduil's whole deal, whatever his problem was.
Do not speak to me of dragon's fire.
And his crazy scar on his face. There was Bard and family, and where that came from. How his arrow turned into a wind lance.
And then then we also talked about the Gondolin blades and how they're all wrong.
I think we went on a little too long about the Gondolin blades, but that was that had to be said. That was a very blatant homework error. Yeah,
somebody didn't do their homework.
And then there was everything to do with Azog the Defiler and the final battle. None of it was necessary. I mean, obviously the Battle of Five Armies happened, but
it had to happen, yeah.
They tried to play it up way, way, way too much. And they didn't even do a good job of putting it together. I felt like the editing was not... They either didn't have enough time, or I don't know what the issue was. It just did not come together. And that is all of your time we're going to take up today.
That's all. That's all for today. Come back for part 3. If you didn't listen to episode 1,
you might
want to go back and do that. We talk about why we hate The Hobbit for like 35 minutes. It's fine. It's fun.
It's all right.
Yeah. So go back and listen to that if you haven't.
And we're going to be coming back to you one more time about this. It may seem unnecessary, but so were the three Hobbit movies. So
exactly.
We're going to make this just as unnecessary.
Yeah, so we'll be coming back to you with that. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Subscribe on iTunes.
You can catch us on SoundCloud too, if that's more convenient.
If that's more your thing. But yeah, subscribe on iTunes if you think we're cool. Tell everybody, tell all the nerds if you think we're cool. We think we're cool.
Tell your mom.
Tell your mom, she'll love it.
She already thinks we're cool.
Salty language, but it's good, right? Well, thanks for listening to us, guys. We'll come back soon with part 3 of why the Hobbit movies suck. Where we're actually not gonna try to talk about why they suck. We're gonna talk about
We're gonna touch on some things we liked about it.
some things.
So I suppose it'll be part 3, what we actually liked about the Hobbit movie.
Yeah, and there are a few things.
It'll be a much shorter episode.
Yeah, it'll be like 15 minutes. We'll probably talk about something else. Maybe Círdan. I don't know.
We'll see.
Hashtag Círdan lives.
Thanks for listening,
Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon.
This is Keep On Tolkien.
Keep on Tolkien.